Perhaps by the time that you are listening to this podcast, you have already heard this expression: the customer is always right. If not that one, have you heard about this expression? The customer comes first. So if that is the case scenario, can you enlighten me on why these gig companies like Uber Eats, DoorDash, Skip the Dishes, and GrubHub in the United States, why they do not put the customer first? If you're a little bit confused upon what I just said, then stick around, because I'm going to talk about it. Last week on the Dash with Ash, I talked about bon cop, bad cop delivery drivers. But realistically speaking, if I'm gonna be honest, the bad cop of them all is these head corporations of these gig companies, because of truly how they make a constant battle between delivery drivers and customers when customers should be taken first, but they never are. Let's start off by talking about inflation. For those that do not know, inflation is a rising cost on essential services like groceries, for example, each year. On average, inflation costs rise about 2 to 3% each year. But since the pandemic has happened back in 2020, inflation has skyrocketed, hitting numbers like 7 or 8%. And this is something we can't do anything about. Now, if you think inflation costs are getting pretty bad, why don't I talk to you about the price that you're going to be paying if you decide to be a customer and order off these apps? So I'm going to open up my Uber Eats application as if I was a customer. And right now, I've selected a common restaurant here where I'm located called Rio Pizza. Now, in no shape, way, or form am I blaming the restaurants for the cost on these apps, because these apps are controlled by these companies, not the restaurants. I just looked up a 14-inch steak, pepperoni, and all-dressed submarine served with fries. If I go on Rio Pizza's website, I'm seeing the cost of that going for $17.99. But open on Uber Eats right now, it's $20.99. And we're just getting started. Each item listed amongst Uber Eats is about a $2 to $3 increase. So right there, you got over your 2% inflation cost. But if I go for the delivery fees, for example, Uber shows it's a 49-cent delivery fee, which is not bad. But then they're showing plus $2 to $4 service fee, which does not go to the driver, which many customers do assume, which is fine, because it's not like Uber is trying to correct it on their platform. And then you gotta add a tip involved. So let me do some simple math here. I'm going to get 3 items off of Uber's website. I'm going to pay $3 more per item. I'm at $9. Let's add my 50 cents for delivery fee. And let's maximize it at $4 for service fees, because every single one of them is different. Now, if I'm being nice and I'm getting a $5 tip, how much more am I paying just because I'm using one of these applications? I am paying at least $18 more for just the same order that I could get from a delivery driver if I call the restaurant or if I order off of their website directly. Of course, give or take the $5 tip in person, but at least I'm saving at least $13 by doing it elsewhere besides these apps. Now, is that truly putting the customer first if you're making their total bill more than even inflation itself? I don't think so. But let's talk about another way, how they're not helping the customers. I have been told by numerous customers before that regardless if it's Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, GrubHub in the United States, or even DoorDash that they thought either the delivery fee or the service fee went to the drivers. Once the customers find out that that's not the case scenario, they have another dilemma on their hands. Delivery fee or service fee is mandatory by these companies. They have exceptions. You got to get a membership with them and pay per month with them. But do you really want to be doing that? So, your option is pay the service and delivery fee because that is mandatory. If you don't pay those fees, your order will not go through. But at the end, tip is optional. And by the end of it, they're looking at their final bill and they're going, shit, this is a lot of money. So some of them don't tip because they think we're getting the money from the service fee or delivery fee. So what ends up happening with non-tip orders? If you've been following my podcast for a while now, you would know that I've mentioned these companies don't pay us enough. It's the customers that pay through tip. So a non-tipping order sits there. Now, here's a scary question that many customers do not want to hear the answer to, but I'll give you the truth. Just how long can a non-tip order sit on the counter? Well, even though I have not held a microphone to an employee's face at a restaurant to interview them, I can say I have asked that exact same question. And the answer across the board is it will sit there for 4 to 6 hours after being cooked until somebody picks it up or somebody throws it out. It absolutely disgusts me to know that food can be sitting on a counter for 4 to 6 hours and still go out to a customer. Because even though you've paid enormous amounts of service fees, Uber doesn't care enough, or DoorDash, or Skip, or GrubHub to put the customer first. Because if they did, after maybe 20 minutes, they should be bumping up these offers, which will force the drivers to go and get the orders because the payment is decent. But instead, they don't give a rat's ass about their customers because no matter what, they're gaining service fees on top of fees, on top of more fees. And in the end, the customer can be getting very sick off of food that has been sitting for a lot of hours. Now, there is exceptions to gain the food faster. I have seen it and dealt with it that the customer has contacted Uber within less than an hour and said, "Where's my food?" And when the customer calls in, and I refer to Uber a lot since I mainly work for Uber, but when the customer calls in, Uber then puts up the offer on the order. And so would these other companies, which allows the drivers to be able to make a little bit of money. But that's only when the customer is exhausted upon waiting, because many of them do think we just got paid in service fees, but we didn't. Only then will they actually get their food on time, and maybe instead of it being hot, it will at least be warm. The terminology "the customer is always right" or "the customer comes first" lies within these restaurants, not these gig applications. Because I've seen these restaurants get backed up with orders sitting on the counter waiting to be sent out, and a lot of the employees become heartbroken knowing many of them won't even go out. Especially those big amounts of food orders that they have taken the time and energy to make, and they've made it nice and ready and organized in the bag, but they know that these gig companies, because we've told them, don't pay enough to us, charge too much to the customers, and just make a domino effect waiting to happen to the point that that food just goes to waste. My home is my safe space, much like everybody else's. But like I mentioned last week, there's some bad drivers. If you're going to put your customer first, get rid of those bad drivers. Because these drivers are showing up to customers' homes, and a lot of them have bad intentions. And a lot of them know how to take note of an address. So what's stopping them from repercussions later? These companies say they're putting their customer first. These companies are saying that they're taking proper precautions. But are they truly for the customer, or are they just for themselves? There is a reason why I do not order off of these platforms, and that's because I refuse to give them my money. It's not that I'm giving it to the driver, a good potential driver. It's that I'm giving it back to these gig companies that truly don't deserve it. And when I go out and I do my orders, I always put my customer first. I don't accept non-tip orders because I truly can't pay my bills with that. But that's not my customer's issue. That's for these companies to figure out and pay me more. But I know that these companies don't put their customers first, but the ones that do get me as a driver know that that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Next week on the Dash with Ash, we're going to be talking a lot more about this whole tipping conversation, because we're going to be talking about tipping culture. I'll catch you lovelies in the next episode.